Hello, I'm James D. Watkins. Again, this is another book review. Now, a book review is something that I do occasionally, not often, but occasionally. Why do I do a book review? It's because the majority of people in today's society don't read. That's why. Now, these book reviews are no more than 13 minutes. Depending on the book, sometimes it may go to 20 minutes if the book is in-depth and pretty thick or large, per se. Having said that, the subject matters for these book reviews varies, because my subject matters, my interest varies as well. So the book reviews will reflect that. Now, the book review will list the title of the book, the author, how many pages in the book, the theme of the book, what the book is about. If the book is not available, then what I will do is state so, okay, or show you a cover of the book as well. But I'll always list the title of the book and the author of the book. So if you are interested in getting that book or reading it or checking it out, please look it up. Depending on the size and the magnitude of the book, I will highlight certain chapters. And if doing so, then I will state so, okay? Because some books are like 500, 400 pages, 600 pages, 800 pages. I so don't have the time. So if I spotlight certain chapters in a certain book, as long as the theme and the interests me, then I will do a chapter review per se, or a synopsis of that whole book index review. This is how the ratings will go for this. It's not thumbs up or thumbs down, no. I do it like this. If I give a book a one-page review, or rating, one-page rating, that means the book is not worth your time. I hate to say that, because books, scripts, stories, screenwriting takes a lot of time and effort. So I don't want to disparage artists out there. But if the book is, if I feel, in my opinion again, it's not worth the time of other people's time, I'll give it probably 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages. However, if it's a stellar book, if it's a book I say go out and get, I'll give it 10 pages. That's like the thumbs up per se. 10 pages. Now, I will list the number of the pages as well, like I said before, as 2. Having said that, this book review is called The Song of Spider-Man, the inside story of the most controversial musical in Broadway history. The author is Glenn Berger. The pages is 352 pages. The Song of Spider-Man, the inside story of the most controversial musical in Broadway history. The Broadway show is officially called Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark. That's the official title. And I do have a copy of this book right here. Also, don't worry, I'll list the title again and the author as well too. But this is the book I'm going to review today, or this evening I should say. The Song of Spider-Man. From the inside cover, this is what I wrote from the inside cover. As one can imagine, writing a Broadway musical has its own challenges. But it turns out there are challenges one can't imagine when you're collaborating with 2 rock legends and a superstar director to stage the biggest, most expensive production in theater Broadway history. And so begins the reading of probably the greatest book about what really goes on behind the scenes of what it takes to mount and stage a production, any production. Now, what I do in my book reviews, they're loose, they're relaxing for me. I write everything down, okay? It's not scripted per se, like I do my other productions. This lets me in my mind ease a little bit, but still do something creative and something different. So, book review. From egos to unforeseen accidents to not having enough money. Believe me, I know that part, not having enough money. It's all here in this book. I have picked up and read this book at least 3 times. Now, you would think by now I would have bought it. But thank God for the library. But I think I will eventually buy it. I will purchase it because the author, Glenn Berger, lays bare the behind-the-scenes viciousness, the egos, the backstabbing, and the physical and mental pitfalls of trying to put on and produce a theatrical production, and a production of Broadway at that. Now, as a fellow writer and creator myself, I am enamored how other creators go about their works. Glenn Berger, he is a celebrated writer. He has wrote numerous plays and over 150 episodes for children's television. He's won awards too. Now he was chosen to write this book or play to the famed superhero Spider-Man, and to put him in one of the most expensive musicals in history. As Mr. Berger puts it, this book is an epic attempt by earnest human beings to tell a story, and to tell that story brilliantly. And he did. I have to admit, he did. This book is about creativity, money, egos, and death. The lead producer, the one who Glenn Berger credits with putting it all together, and the one who more than likely he would have held this show together, his name was Mr. Tony Adams. He was a producer. He was 52 years old. And he also died of a heart attack at a meeting of the creative team behind Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark. He went to the bathroom, had a heart attack, and fell down dead. And exactly who was this powerhouse of a creative team, you're asking? Well, the first one is Julie Taymor. She's director of films, multiple Shakespearean theatrical productions, in a wide array of avant-garde forms. And most notably, she directed the billion-dollar grosser on Broadway called The Lion King. The other part of this powerhouse theatrical production, or Broadway venture, and who never produced a Broadway show before, was none other than the Edge and Bono of the U2 band. You may be thinking, how could all this go all so wrong? But it did. These people were professionals at the top of their game. Surely they were afforded access and they had everything at their disposal that they needed. The very top of theatrical professions in the world, in the whole field. Wouldn't these powerhouse celebrities and creators have the seemingly unlimited financial resources that us would give almost anything to have? How was it possible that these seemingly titans of industry not be so organized and simply write or jot down dates, plans, personnel, and logistics for this gargantuan of a show? See, one thing in my book reports, I'm loose with my words. So if I misspell a word or say a word, you can say so, I don't care. And the answers to those in your questions would be almost a yes. But theater, like life, has a way of caving and carving out its own direction. And boy, did this one did. Now imagine, if you will, you have been hired or selected to write the story and dialogue to one of the world's beloved superheroes, and one who is smashing movie box office records at the same time. You're sitting at a 5-star hotel in a restaurant in Dublin, Ireland, and you're dealing and dining with powerhouse directors and players for this Broadway musical. And when the check comes in, or bill for the dinner comes in, you don't have any money to pay towards that bill. This is what happened to Mr. Glenn Berger. Here he was sitting with Bono, The Edge, and Julie Taymor. But Glenn was broke. He had no money. I'm going to do a quick reality check for those of you who are not involved in the arts at all. We all don't get paid what you may think we get paid, especially putting on a theatrical production, let alone a Broadway production. You can look it up. There's a huge percent of shows on Broadway that don't break even, they close. Usually all the upfront money the producer finds in mainly forming the production team, all the aesthetics behind it, the investors, the silent backers. They're also known as angels, silent people with money, but they're silent. The creditors from other producers, wealthy friends, and families, and or the producer finances the production themselves. Sometimes it does that happen. The producer, they finance the production themselves with their own line of credits. Or they put their house or apartment or any real estate up as collateral. Or they're mortgaging their house or their mansion or mansions. There's something called above the line talent. Above the line talent and below the line talent. And it relates to how payroll and how the funds or money are dispersed. Glenn Berger, Bono, The Edge, and Julie Taymor was not receiving any money from Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, the musical, because, number one, the show hadn't even started rehearsals yet, and number two, any and all upfront monies were going to finding and renting out a theater for at least a 12-month lease, a year practically, paying huge insurances on the rental and injury insurance. We'll get to that later. Injury insurance with all the actors and stunt people. Costumes, the actual special effects, etc. All that had to be paid with upfront money. Also, the staff, crew, and cast, they received weekly salaries. But the creatives don't get paid until performances begin. Which, to me, it was always interesting because Glenn Berger, Julie Taymor, Bono, The Edge, they're creatives. Creatives. But they were mainly producers. So they're above the line talent. So they don't get money up front. But the actors, the tech people, stage crew, stagehands, they get their weekly salaries, however that may be. So, Glenn Berger, even though he's the head writer for this show, he was broke. And he was sweating because he had no money for this big dinner bill in Dublin, Ireland. But The Edge from U2, I guess he's a guitar player, yeah. The Edge said, no, Glenn, this hotel and restaurant was owned by him and Bono, and they will take care of the dinner bill. Glenn wiped sweat off his forehead. That's a very funny story he told. Sad but funny. Now you're probably asking and wondering, how come Marvel Comics or Marvel Studios didn't financially back this Spider-Man musical? After all, it's their superhero character. I could go in detail on how decades earlier than this, Marvel Studios and Marvel Comics went into bankruptcy, and they didn't have complete control over the majority of their characters. But for the sake of this review, Marvel licensed the rights to Spider-Man for this musical to the producers, and those producers were hurrying to raise money to produce this musical before the rights reverted back to Marvel. Basically, if either you or I had the money Marvel was looking for, you or I could have produced our own Spider-Man musical if we had the money. That's how that works. But these particular individuals, Tony Adams, the man who had a heart attack in the beginning, he had the funds, the money to approach Marvel for the rights and license to do a musical. But Marvel gave him a deadline. If not, the rights would go back to Marvel. Separate from the show's budget, additional millions of dollars had been budgeted to convert the Hilton Theater. The Hilton Theater, I was there, had to be converted to what the show needed. And then, when the show left the Hilton Theater, it had to be converted back to what it once was. So again, millions and millions of dollars. Now, due to the costs renovating the Hilton Theater, which became the Fox Theater later on, years later, due to the costs renovating that Hilton Theater, the producers did approach the Marvel board and the financiers. And at first, Marvel was going to inject only $30 million into the show. But Once the Marvel representations saw the show's business ledger, that's the, how to put this, a business ledger is almost cash flow, money going in, money coming out. As I said earlier, there is no money coming in yet for the show. It hasn't even started yet. All the money was going out. No tickets was being sold yet. There was no advance yet. So the representative and the financiers from Marvel, they saw the money involved with this show. It's called the ledger, the financials. And when they saw that, they closed their checkbooks and they left. They was like, no, this show needs to be put under control financially first. Plus, this is another plus, the Disney Corporation was on the verge of buying Marvel, and the representatives didn't want to rock the boat with a risky and expensive Broadway show. They wanted their books, their financial books, the ledger, to look good in front of Disney before Disney considered purchasing Marvel. That's how that works. Dress it up, basically. Such is the life of an artist or an impresario. It's a person, what that means is it's a person who organizes or promotes the show, they oversee it, they're the ringmaster, and they fund productions. According to Glenn, the show was so big, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, this show was so big, so tactical, and so cumbersome that after 4 days, they were only getting through 42 seconds of show time of every hour of tech. So basically, after every 4 days, for every hour, they only got through 42 seconds on average. They even considered doing changes to the show as it opened and during its run, which is not unheard of. A lot of Broadway shows do that. If there's issues, they'll still open the show, but during the daytime, there'll be rehearsals, or during the dark days. Dark days means when the show's closed, they're not open. They'll rehearse with the producer, director, and the cast and talent to refine or retool the show. That was an option for this show here, but it was so big and so logistically cumbersome, they decided to try to do the best they could. One unfortunate aspect that came out of the making of Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark was the biggest draw. Even if it was macabre, and that was on stage, and the live injuries that the actors and stunt people suffered and went through. Eventually, the production team, they fired Julie Taymor, and they decided on a much less avant-garde telling of this musical. Julie Taymor, again, was more artistically avant-garde in theater. If you've seen any of her Shakespearean shows, it's out there. It's different. She brung that to The Lion King, the Broadway show. It worked. My God, it worked for that. But it may not work for other shows. So anyway, the producers end up firing her a couple of years later while this was still going through previews and rehearsals. Even the title had an artistic depth to it. Turn Off the Dark. Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. A lot of people was like, what the hell does that mean? According to Glenn, the book writer, the author of this book, according to him, the new producers and the new creative production team wanted a more lucid and approachable show. This is a side note, okay? I read some online video reviews of this show when it first came out, the first version. There was 2 versions. This is the first version that Julie wanted. And apparently, there was a former technical crew member, and what it was, he was commenting on the online chat forums. And according to this guy, the first iteration of this show was an abstract piece of live art. He read that it being that way in the beginning was to its detriment. It worked against it. The second iteration, after he fired Julie Taymor and the producers took over the show, is called the second iteration. The second iteration of this show was more simplified, according to this guy, the tech crew. It was simplified, dumbed down, and streamlined to make it digestible for paying audiences. And don't forget, Broadway's in New York. They rely on tourists, so they want to make things easy to digest for tourists, much like Orlando, Florida, or Vegas, certain attractions. You don't want nothing too thought-provoking, because people's coming out of town, from out of the country, they want something easy to digest. So I like how you put that, digestible. In other words, this second iteration of the show, it will resemble theme park entertainment, which is what Julie Taymor and the original producers wanted to avoid at all costs. They didn't want this show to be for theme park mentality, no. However, when she got fired, and the other producers, the original producers left or got fired, the new producers said, no, we have to make our money back. It has to be more digestible. They imagined, well, this is Julie Taymor originally. She imagined a theatrical wonder that stood upon the cusp of artistic imagination, of that theatrical wonder, and it would exalt them all at the edge of creative and live interactive of greatness. That's what she imagined, Julie Taymor. They didn't want to be associated with disposable pop culture. Now, that's interesting. One moment here. Having said that, there's nothing wrong with pop culture. It makes the world go around. In fact, that's how social media is built, on pop culture. But to certain artists, such as Julie Taymor, Tony Adams, the original producer, the guy who died of a heart attack, they wanted something more than pop culture. They wanted to go beyond that, exalt that. And they wanted to use a recognized hero, character, Spider-Man. Well, at the end of the day, it is all business. It is called show business, after all. Lawsuits was filed, inflammatory statements were made, and people were fired from the show. There was spite and backbiting, just as there is in non-budgeted shows. And it goes to show you, all of you, that no matter how much press, publicity, and money a show may have, the human element will always be present. My final analysis of Spider-Man, well, I'm sorry, that's the show, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, but my final analysis of Song of Spider-Man, the inside story of the most controversial musical in Broadway history, is basically what I stated in the beginning of this book review. Awesome. A complete breakdown. A complete showing of embarrassment, of not having enough money, being broke, almost couldn't make payroll for the actors and crew. Complete, unabashed openness. It was an awesome book. However, Glenn Berger is a writer, and at times he weaves his account in a script story fashion. And if you aren't paying too much attention, certain paragraphs or sentences will lose you. And you may have to go back and reread his sentences or that paragraph over again. Other times, Glenn, he would suddenly break his train of thought while he is writing, and he would reference a certain other story or a myth or an ancient fable in relation to what he is writing about. And again, as a reader, it will throw you off, I have to admit. You have to go back and read that. So wait a minute, what the hell is he talking about? Oh, he's referring to a Greek mythology. He's referring to Icarus, the story of Icarus, the boy with the wings who flew too close to the sun, and his wings burnt and he fell, whatever. But he reverts to a lot of stories, mythical fables, in relating to what he's going through. It's interesting, but it will throw you off. Final. This book has 352 pages out of a 10-page rating. Remember, 10 pages means the best, awesome. I give this book 9.5 pages. I know I fumbled my words a lot because I talk fast. I'm trying to work on that. So once again, it is worth your time to get this book. Song of Spider-Man, the most controversial musical in Broadway history. Out of 10 pages, I give it 9.5 pages. As I close, I'm going to say something else. Side bit. When she was fired, Julie Taymor, she sued the production company and those producers for $200,000. The $200,000 would have been her royalties for directing this musical, if she would have stayed with the musical. In February of 2012, the producers settled with her And with the union, because there's on Broadway, you have to. That's why. Well, let me back up. On Broadway, it's run by unions, stagehands, actors, singers, dancers, makeup. So it's run by unions. Okay, that's why. I could talk about this at some other time. When Phantom of the Opera came to New York back in the early '80s, the unions was like, no, you have to hire all American cast, American actors. But the big producer, Cameron McIntosh, pulled his ace in the hole. He was like, hey, no problem, we won't do the show in New York. So the union, they kind of, what's the word, conceded, and they made some concessions for Phantom of the Opera to come in the '80s. But that's another story for a different time. But anyway, with Julie with the union, they wanted $200,000. She wanted that. But this is what they settled with. In February of 2012, the producers of the musical Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark, they settled with her and agreed to pay her, ready for this, $9,750 a week while the show would still be on Broadway. Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark is no longer on Broadway. It lost money. In the beginning, people went to the show due to the accidents I mentioned earlier. They went to see it. It was a macabre feel, really, really weird. But they had $10 million advance, and then that dropped down to $4 million advance. From February to June, it dropped, 2011, from $10 million to $4 million. And then the show needed so much money per week, like all Broadway shows do, to keep going. Didn't have that. I was shooting a video called The Disappearance of New York. I made the city of New York disappear. I'm a magician, illusionist, by the way. And I shot in front of the Fox Theater, which was the Hilton Theater. Remember? They rented the Hilton Theater out to use it, but the Hilton changed ownership. It became the Fox Theater. So when I got to New York to shoot my video, my illusion video, it was the Fox Theater, and Spider-Man, it was inside rehearsing. Security, of course, wouldn't let me in. I went to shoot some behind the scenes. The security was really tight. But anyway, the show ended up closing, and there were talks that they want to do arena shows. That's big. There's a lot of religious arena shows going on, mainly in Vegas. But the show, as I said before, was so cumbersome. Logistically, a nightmare. It was a monster. They couldn't do it, the money-wise, well, financially-wise. So, there we go again. I'm James D. Watkins. I want to say thank you so much. Sometimes my glasses get fogged up, and sometimes it's hard for me to see with this fogged up. I'm James D. Watkins. This, again, is my book review. Thank you.